So, hi everyone, welcome to Security Highlights. My name is Nathaniel Dick, and I'm managing the Cybersecurity Information Security for DornerWorks. So today we're just going to have an informal discussion with Lisa Plaggemier, the Executive Director for the National Cybersecurity Alliance, about what she's found in Cybersecurity Awareness Month and some helpful tips for us. So welcome, Lisa, to this discussion.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so can you talk a little bit about the Cybersecurity Awareness Month is done, October. What have you found? What are some helpful tips throughout the month that you've been highlighting for people?
Well, so leading up to Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we finish a report every year. And this year we surveyed 1,000 people in the US, 1,000 people in Canada, and 1,000 people in the UK. And so we finished that in time for Cybersecurity Awareness Month so that we can use that as a basis for talks with organizations like yours and the press and what have you. And one of the things we did this year was we asked the employees of the organizations that invited us in to speak, we asked them some of the same questions we asked the public. So some of the things that we learned about people aged 18 through retirement age in our survey of 3,000 people, what was interesting to me was the difference between how some of their answers and the general public's answers who may or may not get cybersecurity training, and then the answers of people who work at companies that invited us in to speak and also have pretty robust training and awareness programs, right? Their employees get frequent training. They're probably being sent simulated phish. Nathaniel, you probably have an evil twin that's sending simulated phish out to your employees.
I do.
So a lot of those employees tend to be more aware of things. So for example, they will say that they are, when they've had that training, that we ask them about 10 or 15 different things, like, have you changed any of these behaviors because of the training that you get? And the most popular answer across the board is, I feel better at recognizing phishing because of training. We also learned that only 8% of people on average did absolutely nothing as a result of the training that they got. So we thought that was really good, that 92% of people have done something. The other popular answers were using multi-factor authentication more frequently, not using the same password over and over again more frequently, things like that.
What kind of training was it? Like, was it just an informal training, or did it have to be more involved type of training?
No, this was all anybody who said they had any type of cybersecurity training.
So just kind of a whole spectrum of different training.
Yep, exactly. A lot of people reported that they're now keeping their home equipment up to date instead of clicking remind me later.
Okay.
Which is good.
That's a good start.
One of the troubling statistics as far as updates goes is that to find the number here so I don't tell a lie, I think it was around 30% or so, 35% of people, something like that, said that they believe that their devices are automatically secure somehow, like that they don't have to take any action at all. Let's see.
Like if they have an Apple
device. 35% presume their device is secure. Yeah, so they don't realize that they have to set it to turn on automatic updates. And then the other piece of advice we like to give is to turn your stuff off once in a while. We've gotten out of the habit of powering down because, especially with COVID, we've been on all the time. You're home all the time. You're not exactly, shutting down your equipment and putting it in your backpack and going home.
And it used to be you kind of had to shut it down because it wouldn't work. But now it's like it actually works a little bit. So interesting, yeah.
But getting people to do that, those are the two things where I think people have the biggest disconnect between work and home. One is keeping software and machines up to date, operating systems up to date. And then the other one is backing up data. So our employers are really good at doing this for us, but we're not so good at doing it at home. So what we recommend are the automatic cloud backup services. Those are a lot more affordable than they used to be. And I don't think that's necessarily made it into your average consumer's mind that maybe they should be doing that. And they're kind of set it, forget it, super easy to use. The other thing we learned was that, so this stat terrified me. This was true. As far as the general public goes, when we ask them how often do they use long, complex passwords? How often do they use passwords that they don't reuse anywhere else? And the data was a little iffy on that, little more password reuse than we feel comfortable with. But when we asked people how they keep track of all their passwords, the most popular answer was I write them down in a notebook.
Oh,
And
wow.
I thought for certain, when I surveyed the employees of the organizations that had us in to speak during October, I thought for sure that those of us of working age, like that has to be people like my mom who do that, right? That could possibly be the rest of us. Well, guess what? That was also the most popular answer of about 90% of the organizations that that we spoke to. And we spoke to, I personally spoke to about 60, and then I had a colleague who did more. So one of those was also a large government agency full of people that should know better. So
yeah.
was,
so it seems like the training is doing something, but we're like missing some things along the way. Is that what you're kind of finding?
Yeah, I think that, well, I think there's a big disconnect. So we ask people to use long, complex passwords or passphrases, and we tell them they can't reuse them twice. So then people think up little tricks where they just change a few characters, or, you know, they still have like the same core password. And I think what people don't understand is that the software that the bad guys are using can you know, run through all those different iterations very quickly. You know, if they figure out that we're using some sort of system to have the same core password, but then we're just switching out a few things every time. So so then people get pretty desperate. Like, how am I going to remember all those, right? If I really am using passwords that are long and complex and unique, like truly unique, that's humanly impossible these days. So the companies who are using password managers for company use and then extending those for employees to be able to use in their personal lives as well, we see much better habits. They're using much longer passwords. They're using more truly unique passwords. But I think that's been the big eye opener for me, is that if we don't enable people with tools to do the right thing, they're going to find another way, right? They're going to do whatever they have to do. And if that means writing them down in a notebook, that's what that means. I'll hear people say, well, you know, what are the chances that somebody's going to break into my house and get my password notebook? And I say, yeah, you know, that's probably pretty low, but you can't tell me you haven't taken it on vacation with you or taken it to a coffee shop with you. And then
my favorite is people like put the sticky note on their screen and then snap a picture, and you kind of can't see it from the social media post, but if you zoom in, you can kind of get it.
Yeah. I think what I don't like about written down passwords is that the recovery is so terrible. Like if I had all my passwords in a notebook and I lost that, like I'd rather lose my wallet than my password notebook. Like I can call my credit card companies and stop those. I can, you know, I don't really carry cash anymore. Like no big deal. If I lose access to my accounts, that's incredibly difficult, because once the bad guy has control of your account and you try to regain control, he's just going to keep kicking you out again. Like it's really, really hard to get control back. I read an article a couple weeks ago about a woman. It took her 3 months to regain control of her Instagram account, and that was just Instagram, right? Like, I mean, just Gmail. You know, Google doesn't have an 800 number that you can call and get it sorted.
A lot of these social media companies are pretty much you go figure it out.
Right.
Exactly. What are you seeing with regard to the limits of passwords? Like an 8-character password can be cracked in an hour or less.
Yeah.
Are people starting to wake up to that and say we need multi-factor authentication, or is that even part of the vocabulary?
I think that well, a large percent of people didn't know what MFA is. When you say multi-factor authentication to them, 43% of people had said they'd never heard of it. When you describe what it is, then you get a different answer. So I think the name is terrible. Like we should have named it something better. Most people have used it. And then once people start using it, 94% of them say that they're still using it. So once we go in and configure it on an account where it hasn't been mandated to us that we use it, then we're pretty good at keeping up that habit, and we're not going to go back and turn it off again. So I think realizing that when it was brand new, people complained about it a lot more, the inconvenience of it. I don't think people understand very well that, you know, because we're all using so many weak passwords, because we're using passwords that are for sale on the dark web, that's why it's so important to use MFA. I know they understand that it's like extra security, but I don't think they understand why it's out there. But I don't really care. All they really need to know is to use it.
Well, it seems like we've all seen the movies where they whatever, the person tries to hack into the website and tries a million passwords and is able to get in.
Right.
But I haven't seen a movie yet where multi-factor authentication is used, so maybe that we just need to start
I know.
educating more people about those types of authentication methods. But
absolutely. And I know some security folks like to split hairs about how text notifications for MFA are less secure. But honestly, if you look at it, the cases of SIM swapping and SIM jacking are so incredibly rare. Like, I would rather have you use that than use MFA at all. I really like the Authenticator apps, the push notifications to an Authenticator app. Especially if you use those with facial recognition, like it's literally as fast as like I look at my phone and that's it, I'm into my account. Like it's just so convenient. It's easier than anything else.
We're getting there. Like you see Apple starting to put passkeys in, Microsoft buying into that. Is the passwordless future here soon?
I caution about saying soon, because I think by the time it trickles down, you know, it's one thing. Big tech will get us there, and corporations will get us there in our work lives. We'll get, you know, with the implementation of zero trust, you need fewer and fewer passwords. Big companies are figuring it out, along with a nonprofit called the FIDO Alliance. So they're trying to standardize on what the future of authentication will look like. But as far as like every little company getting there, every, you know, touch point that we have as consumers, I think it's going to be a little while. So in the meantime, I think that password managers are a really good idea. Especially if you install them on your browser. You don't have to spend an entire Saturday afternoon putting all your passwords into a password manager, because you should be watching Michigan football. So you can just put your key accounts in there, like maybe your financial services accounts and stuff. And then if you install it on your browser and you visit an account that doesn't have that password stored in it, then it's going to prompt you. It's going to say, hey, can I add this to the password vault? And if you're using, a lot of them will tell you if you're using a password that's for sale on the dark web. They'll tell you if you're using passwords that are too short, or you're using the same password on too many accounts, things like that. So they can really help us break a lot of bad habits around passwords. And they have Authenticator apps, most of them as well. And you can actually speed up your MFA. I know I use Bitward, and they have a way for you to add the MFA to the account as well as the password to the vault. So so it really speeds up the process of MFA as well.
Yeah, you talked about, like, in case you lost, say, the book or whatever, but then just for people, as like, say, God forbid you pass away, now you have that your significant other or your siblings or whatever can now, if you've published that master password somewhere, you've shared it with them, now you give them that security that they can now access password manager. They can see your list instead of sorting around through all your belongings. Accidents happen, and it is good to have that extra level too.
Yeah, no, you can have family accounts. That's what we've done with our aging relatives and our kids and everything. Yeah, that really helps. Yeah.
In that demographic, what was the age ranges? As the population grows, are some of the older people starting to think about the password managers, or what was that like?
We didn't see any, I'm just looking at the study here. I don't think we saw any age differences between how people keep track of their passwords. I was expecting we would, as I said, I was expecting it would be more people like my mom that are writing them down, but it's not, unfortunately.
Okay.
And I don't know that we have necessarily, the only place in the data where we saw big age differences was so younger people are more likely to get compromised, but when they do, it's for very small dollar amounts for some of the data. When older folks are more suspicious, But when they get compromised, it's for higher sums because they have more resources. And when they get defrauded, it's usually longer term scams like romance scams, mortgage scams, things like that. Being vulnerable emotionally is a really big risk factor for romance scams, obviously, right? And if you're a widow or a widower, loneliness is a contributing factor to people falling for some of these scams. So my advice would be that if you've got aging loved ones, a lot of us are at a time in life where we're trying to keep our kids safe online, and then we're also trying to keep our parents from clicking on things they shouldn't. So if you go to staysafeonline.org, we have resources for people in every age group. And on our YouTube channel, we have a series called Mom Don't Click That. It is based on my experiences with my mom. It's interviews with security professionals, their aging loved ones, mostly their parents, and a stand-up comedian moderates the whole conversation. Guy who's
great.
Colbert. And they're really cute. They're really, they give you a lot of empathy for what it's like to be in that aging demographic of people who did not grow up with all this technology. It is hard. It is really hard. So those of us who have parents in that situation, we find ourselves playing tech support on the weekends.
Yeah.
Like we can end up rolling our eyes a lot. But when you hear those conversations, when you watch those videos, like it just gives you a whole lot more empathy for those folks, and makes you realize that this stuff is really tough. for
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
What have you found with the statistics, as I'm assuming you guys tracked this through COVID? How has that in remote work changed the landscape for this cybersecurity knowledge discussion?
I think so. Before COVID, I would tell you that people would do things on their work machines. There's research. It wasn't our research, but there was research that showed that people perceived that the security around them was greater on their work laptop than on their personal laptop. So they would actually click on things that at home they might not click on because they perceived that the company safeguards were going to protect them. And so maybe they're curious about something and they would click on it. At home they wouldn't take that risk. I haven't seen what that same kind of research has shown since COVID, but I would guess that people are a little more, hopefully have got a little more suspicious, like have a healthy suspicion, because now it's all very blurred, right? You might be using a work laptop, but you're on your home router. I mean, I see a lot more companies giving people advice for their home network, right? Like, changing the default password on your router and stuff like that, making sure you run updates, like all those kinds of things. There was a time 5 years ago where somebody in IT would have said, I don't care what they're doing at home. Right. And that's just not the case anymore. A lot more visibility around VPNs. Mm-hmm. I don't think as many people knew what those were before COVID as do now. Yeah.
Overnight, we had to basically enable office locations around the U.S. or the world. And yeah, it created a big nightmare for a lot of IT people, mm-hmm. but it's also, I think it's been a helpful process as it maybe has accelerated us a few years from the IT industry of how we deal with some of these vulnerabilities instead of just somewhat letting them trickle around for a while. Yeah. What about phishing? So you mentioned phishing. People still need to click on links and emails. They're going to do it. What are some tips to, I guess, avoid getting phished?
So I think the most surprising thing for me, we talk to people, so people feel they have a false sense of security, right? So they feel like somebody else is going to click on the phish, not them. So they feel like their own ability to detect a phish is very high, but other people's ability might not be that great. So I think that's a little bit of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you kind of, which was won the Nobel Prize for Psychology in 2000, right? This idea that people overestimate their abilities. I think there's an old Dilbert where the boss says, "What I don't understand must be easy." It's kind of that kind of thinking. one of the things that I thought was really, really interesting. So 70% of the people in our study say that they very often or always check for phishing or hover over a link before they click on it. The other thing I thought was fascinating was that almost 3/4 of people say that they sometimes, very often, or always reach out to somebody if a message doesn't seem right. And that I thought was really good because so many of the phishing attacks, but like the hardest ones to detect that we're seeing now, are ones where we've had like a vendor or a customer or somebody outside of our four walls who's had a compromise, and you're not getting the email from a spoofed address. You're getting it from a legitimate address, and they, a cyber criminal has jumped in on an existing thread, maybe about paying an invoice or what have you, and they're sending phish or BEC type emails, from an address of somebody that you know and trust. And so those can be really hard to detect. And sometimes it just has to be this feeling that like something's not quite right, or maybe they're asking for a change in process that is unusual. So so if you'd have told me 5 years ago that I needed to pick up the phone if something seemed a little off, I needed to call the sender, I'd have told you that was socially awkward. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to seem paranoid. But for us to learn now that 3/4 of people do that, I thought that was really encouraging.
That is encouraging that people are recognizing this is a big deal.
Right. Yeah. That it's socially acceptable to do that, that your business partner isn't going to think that you're paranoid because you picked up the phone and called them. They might even have more respect for you because they know that you have their security at heart. So
that's good to know. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think people often think, okay, I've got email, Gmail's a big company or Google's a big company. It's going to protect me, or Microsoft, whatever.
Yeah.
And they forget email is not secure. It was a legacy system. It's been kind of grandfathered in, and we use it for everything. It's just kind of, like you said, that false sense of security. It's building upon all that we really don't take it seriously.
Right. We also remind people to report phish. A lot of organizations are talking about that constantly. Google has now actually added, very quietly, they added a way in Gmail to report phish. So it's everybody knows where to go to report spam. It's under the report spam. There's now a report phish option. You have to have the email open to see it. It's at those 3 little dots on the top right. But we encourage people all the time to report, not just at work.
That's good. Yeah, I think that definitely has helped an organization in developing that process of, hey, if you see something, just let us know. And
Yep.
What are some statistics that you found from that survey, or anything else you learned from the Cybersecurity Awareness Month?
So the most popular password length was 9 to 11 characters.
Okay.
Which isn't awful, but only 16% said 12 or longer, and that was our favorite answer. Only 2% of people said they're using a password of 6 characters or less, so that was good. Let's see. We talked about writing passwords down. We talked about the other thing we learned was about cyberbullying. Actually, half of it goes unreported, and that was kind of terrifying to us. We did a campaign this past fall in September, around back to school time, right before Cybersecurity Awareness Month. We did an anti-cyberbullying campaign, and we worked with a friend of mine who is head of physical security at Dell Technologies, who lost a daughter to cyberbullying. She got a concussion playing girls lacrosse and hadn't had any previous mental health issues, and within like 48 hours she was gone. She was cyberbullied online, and then she took her own life. So, and the concussion played a role in that. So we did a whole campaign on staysafeonline.org around cyberbullying. We've got a tip sheet for parents, like how to talk to your kids about this stuff. We've got a sheet for younger kids, a sheet for older kids, just PDFs with just in language that speaks to them about what to do about it. Do I just ignore it and maybe the bully will go away? Sometimes if they don't get a reaction, they will. Do I need to, is it escalating? Who do I need to tell? How do I report it if it happened on a social media app? Do I report it somehow there? Just all those kinds of things. Because I think more of us as parents need to be having that conversation with our kids And we've got resources there that can help. I mean, when I was a kid, you could run away. You could run to the teacher on the playground, but it's really hard to run away in cyberspace. And so what does that mean? Like, what do we need to be telling our kids?
And do you find that this is more for our kids, or is it go all the way?
It can happen to adults. It can absolutely happen to adults. Yeah, we also did a campaign last year on cyberstalking, so they can be related. We've got recorded webinars actually on our website on both, and all kinds of tips and things.
Yeah,
the other
personal story, my wife was a victim of cyberstalking, and somebody attempted to apparently she's involved in the film industry in some way, and somebody attempted to say, hey, meet me in this location, and reached out to the actual firm that this email came from, and they said, no, make sure you don't respond to that email. This is a known like stalking threat. So it's a big deal, and it seems to be something that's really top of mind for a lot of people.
Yep. The other thing we learned is that people find cybersecurity intimidating. They find it a little bit frustrating, and they're generally worried about being victimized. And so, so whenever we're communicating about these things, we try to do it with as much positivity as possible. Like I am on a personal crusade to get rid of the hacker in the hoodie image. And to stop using fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or FUD, when we message about this stuff, because I really think that fear is a bad motivator. Like, trying to get people's attention with scary language, whether we see scary headlines about cyber attacks on the news or whatever it is, or in training, I don't think it inspires people to change their behavior. I think you get a short-term, feeling of like, oh, I got somebody's attention with something scary. But if you left them feeling intimidated and frustrated and worried, then that can cause people to freeze and not take any action at all instead of engage. So that was the other thing that we learned, is that we don't want to intimidate people. We're trying to demystify it. And this October, we just talked about how easy and simple some of these things can be and how convenient. My password manager can fill in my credentials a lot faster than I can. It's incredibly convenient. Using MFA, super easy to do. Like, a lot of these things are not hard. And I realize that security is hard for security professionals. We have a lot to do. It's a hard job. It's stressful. It's complex, and it's constantly moving. And so I think a lot of times when we give advice to normal human beings that aren't security professionals, we tend to make it sound too complex because our own, knowledge is getting in the way. And I think the best advice I have for people is to realize that a lot of these things are really simple and easy and quick to do and convenient to do. And then you'll have peace of mind. You'll feel better if you do these things. It's not about being afraid of some hacker in a hoodie in a far off land somewhere. It's for me, it's about the peace of mind you get and the convenience and speed you can have with some of these things, some of these behaviors, like MFA, like password managers, stuff like that.
So building off of that, if I'm somebody that's concerned or ready to get started doing that, what are like one or two things just to start off that somebody could do to start securing their network or whatever?
If you don't do anything else after you've watched this recording today, but one thing, it would be MFA. And it would be enabling MFA on every single account you have that offers it. There's still even some big tech, even some large social media companies that don't even offer it. Yep. But so for that, I would say make sure you're not using the same password twice, that they're long and complex. And so therefore, you probably need a password manager to help you keep track of them all. So those are the two biggies for me, really. It's better password habits, and for which you probably need a password manager, and using MFA on everything.
Well, thanks so much, Lisa. That was a great discussion around all these different principles. And as we kind of close out Cybersecurity Awareness Month, hopefully we can continue to be more safe. So thanks for coming out today, and help and inform us how to keep cyber safe.
Thanks for having me.